Section 2. The Scientific Worldview. Generally speaking, the evolution of human understanding can be seen as a move from surface observations processed through our limited five senses and intuitively filtered through the educational framework as well as the value characteristics of that time period, to a method of objective measuring and self-advancing methods of analysis which work to arrive at or calculate conclusions through testing and retesting proofs, seeking validation through the benchmark of scientific causality. The natural laws of our world exist whether we choose to recognize them or not. These inherent rules of our universe were around long before humans evolved a comprehension to recognize them with. While we can debate as to exactly how accurate our interpretation of these laws really is, at this stage of our intellectual evolution, there is enough reinforcing evidence to show that we are indeed bound by these static forces that have an inherent, measurable determining logic. The vast developments and predictive integrity found in mathematics, physics, biology, and other scientific disciplines proves that we as a species are slowly understanding the processes of nature and our growing inventive capability to emulate, accentuate, or repress such natural processes, which confirms our progress in understanding them. The world around us today, overflowing with material technology and life-altering inventions, is a testament to the integrity of the scientific process and what it is capable of. Unlike historical traditions where a certain stasis existed with respect to what people believed, as is still common in religious-type dogma today, this recognition of natural law includes characteristics which deeply challenge the assumed stability of beliefs which many hold sacred. As I will explain later, within the context of emergence, the fact is there simply cannot exist a singular or static intellectual conclusion with respect to our perception and knowledge, except paradoxically with regard to the very underlying pattern of uncertainty regarding such changes. This is part of what could be called a scientific worldview. It's one thing to isolate techniques of scientific evaluation for selected interests, such as the logic we might use in assessing and testing the structural integrity of a house design. And it's another when the universal integrity of such physically rooted causal reasoning and validation methods are applied to all aspects of our lives. Albert Einstein once said, "The further the spiritual evolution of mankind advances, the more certain it seems to me that the path to genuine religiosity does not lie through the fear of life and the fear of death and blind faith, but through striving after rational knowledge." While cynics of science often work to reduce its integrity to yet another form of religious faith, demeaning its accuracy as cold or without spirituality, or even highlighting the consequences of applied technology for the worst, such as with the creation of the atomic bomb, which in actuality is an indication of a distortion of human values rather than of engineering, there is no ignoring the incredible power this approach to understanding and harnessing reality has afforded the human race. No other ideology can even come close to matching the predictive power and utilitarian benefits of this method of reasoning. Science requires testing and repeat replication of results in order for it to be validated. But many beliefs of seemingly normal people today exist far outside of this requirement. Apart from traditional religions, the concept of New Age is also associated with this type of superstitious thought. While it is extremely important that we as a society are aware of the uncertainty of our conclusions in general, and hence we must keep an open mind to all positions, the validation of those positions can only come through measurable consistency, not wishful thinking or esoteric fascination. Such invalidated ideas and assumptions pose a frame of reference that is often secured by faith, not reason. It is difficult to argue the merits of faith with anyone, since the rules inherently refuse argument itself. This is part of the quandary within which human society exists today. Do we simply believe what we have been traditionally taught by our culture, Or do we question and test those beliefs against the physical reality around us to see if they hold true? Science is clearly concerned with the latter and holds nothing sacred, always ready to correct prior false conclusions when new information arises. To take such an inherently uncertain yet still extremely viable and productive approach to one's day-to-day view of the world requires a very different sensitivity, one that embodies vulnerability and not certainty. In the words of Professor Frank L.H. Wolfe, it is often said in science that theories can never be proven, only disproven. There is always the possibility that a new observation or a new experiment will conflict with a long-standing theory. Part 2, Section 2, Emergence. At the heart of the scientific method is skepticism and vulnerability. Science is interested in the closest approximation to the truth that it can find. If there is anything science recognizes explicitly, it is that virtually everything we know will be revised over time as new information arises. Likewise, what might seem far-fetched, impossible, or even superstitious upon its first culmination might prove to be a useful, viable understanding in the future, once it's validated by the scientific method. The application of this constitutes an emergence of thought, an emergence of truth, if you will. A cursory examination of history shows an ever-changing range of behaviors and practices based upon ever-updating knowledge, and this humbling recognition is critical for human progress. Section 2, Part 3, Symbiosis. A second point, which is deeply characteristic of the scientific worldview, has to do with the symbiotic nature of things. Largely dismissed as common sense today, this understanding holds profound revelations for the way we think about ourselves, our beliefs, and our conduct. Early intuitive views of natural phenomena might have looked upon the human being as an independent, entirely self-contained entity. Yet, without, for example, oxygen to breathe, we will not survive. This means the human system requires interaction with an atmospheric system, and hence a system of oxygen production. And since the process of photosynthesis accounts for the majority of the oxygen in the atmosphere, it is to our advantage to be aware of what affects this particular system and work to harmonize our social practices with it. When we witness, say, pollution of the oceans or the rapid deforestation of the earth, we often forget how important such phenomena really are to the integrity of the human system. In fact, there are so many examples of environmental disturbances perpetuated by our species today due to a truncated awareness of this symbiotic cause and effect that links all known life systems. Volumes could be dedicated to this crisis. The failure to recognize this symbiosis is a fundamental problem, and once this principle of interacting systems is fully understood, many of our common practices today will likely appear grossly ignorant and dangerous in future hindsight. Section 2, Part 4, Sustainable Beliefs. The very languages we use isolate and organize elements of our world for general comprehension. These languages are systems based upon categorical distinctions which we associate to our perceived reality. However, as needed as such systems of identification and organization are for the human mind, they also inherently imply false divisions. Given that foundation, it is easy to speculate as to how we have grown accustomed to thinking and acting in inherently divisive ways, and why the history of human society has been a history of imbalance and conflict. It is on this level that the physical systems we have discussed come into relevance with belief systems and systems of thought. While the idea of sustainability might typically be associated with processes, eco-theory, and engineering, we often forget that our values and beliefs precede all such ideas and applications. Therefore, true sustainability means we need sustainable values and beliefs, and that awareness can only come from a valid recognition of the laws of nature to which we are bound. Can we measure the integrity of a belief system? Yes, we can. We can measure it by how well its principles align with scientific causality, based upon the feedback resulting. If we were to compare outcomes of different belief systems seeking a common end, how well those perspectives accomplish this end can be measured, and hence these systems can be qualified and ranked against each other. The central belief system comparison I'm going to be making is between the monetary market economy and the aforementioned natural law economy. At the core of these systems is essentially a conflicting belief about causality and possibility. I challenge you to make objective judgments about how well each perspective's potentials might accomplish common end human goals. It could be generalized that any belief system that does not have built into it the allowance for that entire system itself to be altered or even made completely obsolete due to new information, it is an unsustainable belief system. And any belief system that supports isolation and division, supporting the integrity of one segment or group over another, is also an unsustainable belief system. Sociologically, having a scientific worldview means being willing and able to adapt, both as an individual and a civilization, when new awarenesses and approaches emerge that can better solve problems and further prosperity. While many in the world still attribute causality to gods, demons, spirits, and other non-measurable faith-based views, a new period of reason appears to be on the horizon, where the emerging scientific understanding of ourselves and our habitat is challenging the traditional established framework we have inherited from our less informed ancestors. Even modern conveniences that we take for granted are results of this, whether recognized or not. Self-generating, mechanistic logic is found to be universally applicable to all known phenomena. No longer is the technical orientation of science deemed as a way merely to make gadgets and tools. The true message of this worldview is about the very philosophy by which we are to orient our lives, values, and social institutions. As I will argue in more detail later, the social system, its economic premise, along with its legal and political structure, has become largely a condition of faith in the manner that it is now perpetuated. The monetary system of economy, for example, is argued to be based on little more than a set of now outdated, increasingly inefficient assumptions, no different than how early humans falsely assumed that the world was flat, or that demons caused diseases, or that the constellations in the sky were fixed, static, two-dimensional tapestry-like constructs. There are enormous parallels to be found with traditional religious faith and the established cultural institutions we assume to be valid and normal today. Just as the Church in the Middle Ages held absolute power in Europe, prompting loyalties and rituals which most would find absurd or even insane today, those who live a number of generations from now will likely look back at the established practices of our current time and think exactly the same thing.